What would you do if you found yourself in the middle of an active shooter event? How would you react if a gunman entered your workspace and started firing? Would you reach for the phone to call 911? Would you take cover under your desk? Ask yourself, do you know the steps to take that could save your life? Sadly, we need only to hear the news these days to learn of the most recent of these all too common occurrences. And even though you are statistically unlikely to ever be involved in such an incident, you need to have a plan ready that can minimize the risks associated with an active shooter situation. Safety is the #1 priority at our organization. We have policies in place to reduce the likelihood for violence in our workplace, but according to the FBI, more than 80% of active shooter events happen at work. And while such attacks are extremely difficult to prevent or predict, there are things you can do to minimize risk. In this course, we'll cover the things you need to know to stay safe before, during, and after an active shooter event, including what is an active shooter event, common factors in an active shooter event, recognizing potential workplace violence, how to respond when an active shooter is in your vicinity, how to respond when law enforcement arrives, and where to go if you would like more information. According to the Department of Homeland Security, an active shooter is defined as an individual actively engaged in killing or attempting to kill people in a confined and populated area. In most cases, active shooters use a firearm, and there is no pattern or method to their selection of victims. An active shooter in your workplace may be a current or former employee, or an acquaintance of a current or former employee, or a complete stranger. There is no definitive active shooter profile. Attackers have been both men and women of various ages, ethnicities, and other background characteristics. Incidents that occur in the workplace involving a gunman are referred to as active shooter events, and while chaotic for those who must endure them, they often follow similar patterns. For example, according to the Department of Homeland Security, active shooter events are often over within 10 to 15 minutes, and the active shooter will target people in an enclosed space, such as a school, mall, or office. These places typically have limited escape options that are important to note for your own possible use, and we will cover these later in the course. While no single indicator can accurately predict who may become an active shooter, there may be red flags you can observe that could indicate a potential for violence in the workplace by an individual. The reality is that employees typically do not just snap, but often display multiple indicators of potentially violent behavior over time, and this often suggests some form of mental distress or condition. Potential indicators include increased severe mood swings, increased use of alcohol and/or illegal drugs, repeated violations of company policies, explosive outbursts of anger or rage without provocation, exhibits highly paranoid behavior, talk of previous incidents of violence, empathy with individuals committing violence, frequent comments about weapons and violent crimes, depression and/or withdrawal, and expressing thoughts of suicide and other violent acts. If you witness a pattern or increase in these signs and symptoms, you should alert your supervisor or the HR department. Never confront the individual in question with your suspicions. And remember, it's crucial to note that no single indicator will necessarily predict an active shooter situation, so it is best left for a trained representative of our organization to decide what to do with this information. Active shooter events are unpredictable and evolve quickly. These situations are often over within minutes, sometimes before law enforcement arrives. Therefore, individuals must be prepared both mentally and physically to deal with such an extreme situation. Preparation is key in escaping an active shooter event, and one of the most effective ways to prepare is to know the emergency escape procedures, including where and how to evacuate when the primary evacuation routes are unusable. You should take the time to note all of the recommended emergency escape routes for all of the most common areas you may work in throughout the day. Practice walking them so that you can get a feel for what to expect and what kinds of obstacles may present themselves in the wake of an actual emergency. Next, we will look at options to be aware of if you find yourself confronted by an active shooter. Law enforcement recommends that if there is an active shooter in your vicinity, you have 3 strategies to consider. You should run to safety if you can. If you can't escape, you should try to find a safe place to conceal yourself. And as a last resort, if you cannot escape or find cover, then you should prepare to defend yourself. Let's look at these in greater detail. If there is an accessible escape path, attempt to evacuate the premises. Be sure to visualize an escape route and have a plan in mind. Leave your belongings behind. Evacuate, regardless of whether others agree to follow. Try to get them to leave, but do not stay behind with them. Help others escape if possible, but do not attempt to move wounded people. Warn individuals from entering an area where the shooter may be. Keep your hands visible and follow the instructions of any police. And call 911 only when you are safe. If you're unable to run, find a place to hide where the active shooter is less likely to find you. Optimal locations have ballistic protection known as cover, which include thick walls made of steel, cinder block, or brick and mortar, solid doors with locks, and areas with minimal glass and interior windows. Look for areas that are stocked with accessible first aid emergency kits and communication devices. To prevent an active shooter from entering your hiding place, lock the door if possible. For added safety, block the door with heavy furniture and hide along the wall closest to the exit but out of view from any hallway. After you feel you are secure, remain quiet and silence your phone or any other devices to not give away your location. As a last resort, and if neither running nor hiding is a safe option, consider trying to disrupt or incapacitate the shooter by using aggressive force. If you do choose this action, keep in mind the following. Act as aggressively as possible against the shooter. Throw items and use improvised weapons including fire extinguishers, chairs, tools, and small heavy objects. Yell and commit to your actions. There is strength in numbers when confronting an active shooter, but how each individual chooses to respond is up to him or her. Preparation and following these best practices can mean all the difference in you and your coworkers surviving an active shooter event without injury. Next, we will focus on what you need to be aware of when authorities arrive on the scene so that they can confidently and safely do their job and put an end to an active shooter event. Law enforcement's priority is to stop the active shooter as soon as possible. Officers will usually arrive in teams and will proceed directly to the area in which the last shots were heard or to a location that provides an opportunity to subdue the attacker. Upon arrival, officers may be wearing regular patrol uniforms with external, bulletproof vests, Kevlar helmets, and other tactical equipment. Be armed with rifles, shotguns, handguns, and other tactical gear. Use pepper spray or tear gas to control the situation. Shout commands and push individuals to the ground for safety. These officers are trained to neutralize the situation and do whatever is necessary to ensure everyone's safety. In doing so, they may seemingly ignore the injured or may yell orders to civilians caught in the middle to take cover or move to a certain area. It may seem callous, but all of these actions are designed to provide the quickest resolution to an active shooter event with the goal of minimizing injury to the victims of such an incident. When officers find you, it will be crucial for you to follow their instructions. You will need to put down any items in your hands. Immediately raise hands and spread fingers. Keep hands visible at all times. Avoid making quick movements toward officers, such as holding on to them for safety. Avoid pointing, screaming, and yelling. Refrain from asking officers for help or direction when evacuating. Just proceed in the direction from which officers are entering the premises. And not brandish or show any weapons if you are carrying one. When providing information to law enforcement to assist them, keep your responses short and to the point. Information you may need to provide to law enforcement or a 911 operator includes the location of the active shooter, the number of shooters if more than one, a physical description of the shooter, the number and type of weapons held by the shooter, and the number of potential victims at the location. Once you have reached a safe location or an assembly point, you will likely be held in that area by law enforcement until the situation is under control and all witnesses have been identified and questioned. Do not leave until law enforcement authorities have instructed you to do so. Now let's apply what you've learned so far in this short quiz. Understanding the basics of an active shooter event, how you should prepare for it, and how you should react if it does occur can help make the workplace safer for you and your coworkers. Thank you for your participation in this course. You may now exit by clicking the X button in the upper right corner.